welcome to this tutorial. In this video we're going to be looking at exploring After Effects and learning how to use the main functionality of it in one project. So in this video we're going to create something similar to the short that you've just seen, including some two-dimensional mountains in 3D space, using a song and all that good stuff. So we'll jump straight into it, shall we? The first thing I'm going to do is right click and create a new composition. I'm going to call this my main comp. This is where we're going to have all of the main stuff, and we're going to render this composition in the end. I'm going to have it 10 seconds long. For the sake of the video, I'm going to create my background color to be black, just like yours should be. Excellent. So the first thing I'm going to do is create the mountains. So let's right click, new, and I'm going to create a solid, which is a 2D plane of any flat color that you choose. We're going to keep it gray, but we're going to call it mountains. Let's make sure that the width and height are exactly the same as our composition size. So we click main comp size. Just to demonstrate, if I were to move these sliders to make them different size, if I clicked main comp size, they will return to the composition size, and hit OK. So in order to make the mountains, I need to draw what we call a mask, which is a series of shapes and lines which define which area of the layer is actually visible. So I'm going to take my pen tool up here and start drawing some mountains. So I'm going to do just some straight lines in various different shapes. That's a disgusting mountain up there. And I can move them around at will at whatever point. So let's just do something like this. Excellent. Have a tiny one. Let's have another smaller one. Whoops, that curved a little bit. Have a smaller one down here, followed by another big one with some peaks. Let's pull this over a bit. Excellent. And then I'm going to join them all up at the bottom like that. So we've got this sort of jagged shape. Excellent. So now I'm going to create some sort of lighting, gets lighter as you get further to the top, and this is going to be done using gradient, which is an effect inside of After Effects. So if you go into your effects and presets side over here and click inside, you can actually search up whatever effect you want. So I'm going to type in ramp, and you'll find gradient ramp. So you can just click that and drag that onto your layer. Another way to have done it would be to select your layer and right click, go to effect, and you've got all of your different effects that you can apply here. So now that I've got my ramp on, I'm going to decide what colors I want my gradient to have. So first I'm going to swap the colors around, so I have the darkest color at the bottom, and then it's just going to be a case of adjusting the blacks and the whites to wherever I want. One thing I can do is pull the blacks and the whites close to the heights of the mountain, like that, and then just adjust the colors accordingly. So now I can get, whoops-a-daisy, a mid-tone top, and then just a slightly lighter bottom, and we get a nice gradient like that. So that's all cool. We've got solid with a mask and a gradient on, but maybe I want to add some snow onto the top of these. I'm going to do this in a different manner. So I'm going to highlight my layer. I'm going to go to layer. I'm going to click pre-compose. I'm going to call this, we'll call it mid-ground mountains, and you'll see why later. So make sure move all attributes into the new composition is ticked and hit OK. This means that inside of our main comp, we have one layer with no effects on. But if we double click that, we're now in our mid-ground mountains where we'll see the solid layer and effects that we created a minute ago. So to make the snow, what I'm going to do is brighten all of the tips of these mountains until they look white. And to do that easily, I'm going to create what you call an adjustment layer and call it snow. This is an invisible layer, which when effects are applied to, any layer below this adjustment layer will have the effects applied to it. So for example, if I type in exposure and drag that onto my adjustment layer, whenever I drag up the exposure of every layer below it, in this case the mountains, is affected. So I'm going to set my exposure to 4, which will create a nice white colour. However, this is all of the mountains mass which has gone white. So in order to make it just the tips, I'm going to once again select my pen tool and start masking around the tops and tips of the mountains that I want to have snow on. That's just going to go straight across there. Let's go up to these two. And there we go. So come all the way around. And there we go. So I think that these are a little bit harsh endings. I want a nice sort of fade out from the white to the grey. So what I can do here is if I highlight my layer and press F, I bring up the mask feather option. Now at the moment, if I feather it, it'll feather both the sides and it'll feather the horizontal and the vertical axis. Although it doesn't really affect the way it looks in this, I'm going to unlink it and make sure that I only feather the vertical axis, like that. There we go. So if we go back into our main composition now, we've got the mountains with snow on because everything we did in this layer affected what appears in our main comp. Back in the midground mountains, I'm just going to finish off by adding a bevel to my mountains to give it some sort of lighting. So back into effects and presets, search up bevel alpha, and I'm going to drag that onto my mountains layer, not my adjustment layer. And if I disable the HUD using Command Shift H, I can show you exactly what I'm doing here, which is changing the lighting direction, changing the bevel, and the amount of lighting on it. I just changed the bevel so you could see it a great deal there. And there we go. I'm now just also going to scale up the mountains a bit. Just get rid of that beveled layer. And there you go. We've got some sort of 3D bevel to them now. Excellent. So our midground mountains are done. Now, what else do we need in here? Of course, we need a sky. So let's create another new solid. Let's call this sky. And I'm going to use another, the same method that we used to create the mountains gradient. So let's first drag the sky underneath the mountains, so then the mountains appear on top of the sky. Go into our effects and presets and search up ramp again. Double click that or drag it on. So here we're greeted with the same from before, the gradient ramp with black and white. And if we select our black color and change it to a nice sky blue, there we go, we've got a nice sky there. I'm also going to pull down the end of the ramp to make sure the horizon isn't completely white. And there we go, we've got a sky. But what's a sky without a sun? So let's make the sun now, but I'm going to do this in a different method to masking. We're going to use shape layers, which create a sort of uniform shape, which you can change and modulate to your desire. So let's right click, new shape layer, and we're given a bunch of options. Right now, there's really nothing in the shape layer but a dot. But if we go over to this add button here, we can select different things. So I'm going to select a polystar, which will create a star and allow me to change how many points it has. So I'm going to select, let's say 15 points. But right now, if we select off, there's nothing there. Again, it's just the data. We need to fill it in. So I'm going to select add again, and I'm going to choose a gradient fill. And if I open up the gradient fill options and close the path, I can choose a radial fill, which will fill it from the center outwards. Now if I edit the gradient here, I can select the different colors and change them in any way I like. So there we go, we've got a nice sort of sun color, but it's not perfect just yet. So first I'm just going to call this layer sun so I know what I'm talking about, and I'm going to drag on a glow effect. So let's attach that there and set the radius outwards quite a bit. And we've got this sort of glow coming off it. Change the threshold, we can up the radius, we can do all sorts here, but I'm just going to keep it as it is, like that. So if we turn off the glow, you can see the difference is subtle but still worthwhile. The last thing I'm going to do to this is actually add a blur on, but I'm going to specifically choose fast blur because it's the simplest of the lot to use, and I'm going to set it to about a blur of 15, and there we go, we've got our sun. I'm just going to duplicate that glow as well using Command D and throw it underneath. And let's adjust the settings until we can get a nice yellowy tinge again. Excellent. Just like that. And we've got our glow back. Sorry about that. And let's just reposition this sun now. So as it is, it's in the center of our screen. But if we just click on our layer and drag it to wherever we want, we can reposition it. Now I think that sun looks a little bit big as well. So if I select my layer and press S, I can now change the scale of my layer to make it a bit smaller. Another way of doing this is if you select your drop down arrow here and enter the transform settings, you've got settings for your position, your rotation, which we'll get to in a bit, opacity, and of course your scale. Excellent, so that's our sun created. So now we've created a lovely little mountain scene, but we don't have anything going on. It's completely static and there's no song or anything. So we've created a picture. So in the next part, we're going to throw in a song. So let's do that, shall we? We're going to go into our project tab here, right click and select import file. And I'm going to try and find a song which I'd like to import. So if I go down to my royalty-free music folder, and I'm going to select Bensound Little Idea, an excellent little song for this project. Now what I can do now is drag it into its own composition, and I can change the settings of the song in here. So first thing I'm going to do is Command K will bring up your composition settings. Alternatively, you can go to composition and composition settings. And I'm going to set the duration to the same time as my composition, which was 10 seconds long. And I'm going to change the name just to make it Song Little Idea. So now that we've got our 10-second composition, I can change the areas of the song based on the waveform. So in order to do that, all you need to do is click our drop down, open up our audio, and open waveform. Or what I did was I double tapped L, so LL. And now we can drag along and find the waveform which we recognize. So I'm very good with waveforms. I can understand audio from that. But if you're not the same and you struggle to read waveforms, you can simply press the full stop on your number pad and it'll preview the audio for you. Right, excellent. Now I want the song to start at the beginning of a beat, which I would think would be around here. Here we go. Over here. So through trial and error and previewing the song, I managed to find the exact point that I want my track to start, which is going to be here. So I've got two choices. I can either put the cursor over the line and drag it to the beginning, or the way that I like to do it is use Alt, left square bracket to cut it, and that just helps me position it even better. So I go to the beginning of my composition, and then I press left square bracket on its own. Now let's preview what we've got. So now that I've got my song positioned where I want it to be, I'm going to put my cursor on the section where all of the instruments come in, and press the asterisk key in order to set a marker, which lets me know this is where the song instruments come in. There we go. Now back in my main composition, I'm going to drag in my song, Little Idea, and there we go. That marker right there is telling me this is where all the instruments come in, and this is where the action's going to happen in the video, and we'll get to that in a second. Now, since this is an audio layer, I like them to be the same colour as this, so a sort of greeny colour. In After Effects, they call it seafoam. So if we click the little brown square here and select seafoam, it changes the colour of our layer to seafoam colour. And we've got a wide variety of colours to choose from. So now that we've got the video and the audio together, I'm going to create an actual animation. I'm going to make the mountainscape go from night to daytime in sync with the music. So of course we need to make it nighttime. the first thing I'm going to do is create a moon. However, I'm not going to draw it in the composition like I have done with the sun. I'm going to create its own composition. So in project, right click, new composition. We're going to call this moon. I'm going to set this to an actual square width of 360 by 360 and hit OK. The reason I did a perfectly square composition is because it makes it really easy to draw a perfect circle. So in order to do that, we'll right click, new, solid. I'm going to call this moon, and I'm going to set it to a light grey colour and hit OK. Now to create the perfect circle, all we need to do is go up to our rectangle tool. It may be a different shape for you, but it's all up here next to the pen tool. Click and hold and select the ellipse tool. So now we can actually draw circles, but the easiest way to create a perfect circle is to just double click. And there we go, we've instantly got a mask using a perfect circle. Now I want to actually cut out another circle here to actually form the crescent moon. In order to do that, I'm going to move my cursor away from the center and more up to here. I'm going to click and hold, then hold Shift, Alt, Command, and start dragging outwards, and we create this perfect circle again. There we go, so now we've got two masks. So our first mask is set to add, which means all of the area inside of this circle is visible. But so is mask 2, and we don't want that. We're going to use mask 2 as a subtractive mask, so we'll set it to subtract, and what that says is anything inside of this circle is gone, not visible. So we're left with this sort of crescent moon shape. And again, I'm going to throw on a bevel just to give it a bit more lighting. So let's move that up there, change the edge thickness, turn the lighting down, and there we go. We've got a moon. Now just for the sake of centering, I'm going to move it all up a little bit into there. Excellent. So if we go back into our main composition and in our project, we can drag our moon in to wherever we want. I'm going to put it sort of around the same area as the sun, except on the other side. And now I'm going to throw on a glow and throw it on. Now, I don't know how the moon's going to look with the glow against the night sky, because right now we've got a daytime sky. So what I can do to change that is to actually turn off various layers until we've got a black screen. If you just want to show one, okay, try again. If you just want to show one layer, you can actually select that layer and press the little dot button next to the eye, which is the solo button. And there we go. So I can now see the glow against my black background. And if I set it about that much, turn the radius down, there we go. So we've got a nice glow coming from the moon. Set it higher. How does that look? There we go. I think that looks like a good moon to me. Excellent. So now that we've got a moon, we need to change the sky into nighttime. Now the way I'm going to do this is by what we call keyframing the colors here. So to start off, I'm going to move up to where the instruments come in, and I'm going to click this little stopwatch here next to the start of color and end of color. This is now set a keyframe, so at this point in time and forever onwards until the next keyframe, the colors will remain as they are, a blue and a white. However, if I move back a few frames, so let's use my arrow key and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 frames before, I'm going to change the value and set it to a dark blue sort of color. And then I can do the same thing with the end color and set that to whatever color I want. Now, I don't like that color, so I'm going to set the bottom one to blue and the top one is going to be completely black. There we go, that's more of a night sky. Now if you notice the strips of color in the middle here, in between all the keyframes have actually changed. So if we move ahead, they change colour over time, like that. So excellent, that's our first bit of keyframe and animation. Now I'm going to grab both of these two and just move them along a few more frames. As it is, the keyframes go straight from one value to the other with no actual smooth easing in or easing out, so it will look very robotic on the final video. So if we highlight both of them and press F9, we create an ease movement. There we go. So now that we've done that, we've created our nighttime sky, I want to actually create some stars. Now I'm going to do this using particles inside of After Effects. So if I select new composition, call this one stars. Stars, got to remember to make it the composition size. Oh wait, no. Remember to make it 1280 by 720, the same size as my composition, main composition, and hit enter. So first things first, I need to create a new solid. So new solid, let's call this stars. And I'm going to go into my effects and presets and search up particle. And I want CC particle world. And I'll drag that on. Now, if I move along to about 4 seconds where all of the particles are visible, you'll see we've got a big mess of particles. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is just spread out the producer where the particles are coming from. So we'll go into the producer settings and pull it out on the X, pull it out on the Y, and pull it out on the Z. So now we've got various different sizes and distances. Go into the particle settings and we're going to change these lines into stars. So we'll click line and we'll select our particle type to be star. And then I'm going to change the birth colors over here to white and the death color to a more yellowy white. Very subtle, just to add a little bit of variation. And now I'm going to change the size of all of them to much lower than before. Now you'll notice they'll spread out at this point, so again we can drag them and move them back in at any point. There we go, so that's basic how to use the CC particle world. Now I'm going to make note of this number. This is 3 seconds 24 milliseconds in. So go back to our main comp, drag on the stars. I'm going to put that above the sky behind the mountains. And at 3:24, so to get straight to our exact time code, we want to click the time over here and change it. So I'm going to do 3:24. And I'm going to freeze frame it so these stars stay where they are. So right click, time, freeze frame. Now if you don't understand why I freeze framed it, if we go back into the stars composition, as we move along, of course, it all moves like it did when we first added the effect. So brilliant, we've now got these stars in our night sky. Now I'm just going to make them fade in, so they're brighter at the top, whoops-a-daisy, and not so visible at the bottom. Now this is using what we call an alpha matte, so just bear with me on this one. We're going to create a new solid, and I'm going to call this star matte. And a matte is very useful. We're actually using a luma matte, so excuse me, not an alpha matte. So let's start off by typing in ramp, and we'll throw a gradient ramp onto our layer, and we'll solo it. Now what a luma matte does is it thinks, okay, so the brightest areas are going to have the effect. The brighter the area, the more of the effect or layer it shows. So for instance, the black areas are going to be completely invisible and the white area is going to be completely visible, and you'll see what I mean now. So I'm going to solo the stars as well. I'm going to put the star matte above, directly above the stars layer. Now pay attention, when I swap the colours, the white is going to be on top. That means the stars on the top of the window are going to be visible. The stars in the black are not. So just to show, if I swap the layers around, you can see stars are everywhere. The white ones are going to be the visible ones. So if I go over to the track matte here, now if you don't have the track matte options and yours looks like this, you click the toggle switches / modes. Now I'm going to select the track matte on my stars layer and set it to Luma Matte. Now as you can see, all of the stars at the bottom have darkened up, and if I bring that black further up, it darkens them more so as well. Now if I unsolo this, you'll see the stars only appear further into the night sky. And I think that's a nice little gradient of stars there. Excellent. So now that we've got our night sky and daytime sky and everything, we need to animate the sun to move out during the night and move in during the day. So first things first, I want to change these stars so they only appear at night. We'll go to our first sun keyframe, open up the stars transform and keyframe the opacity at 100%. We'll move along to the last keyframe and we'll pull the opacity down to 0 so they're not visible. And then again, highlight them both and press F9 to ease them both out. And there we go, the stars disappear at the same time. Now we're going to move the moon down at the same time. So highlight the moon, go into our transform settings, keyframe the position at the beginning of the transition, and then at the end of the transition, pull the position all the way down. Now if you notice, the moon was in front of the mountains then, so I'm going to take this time to drag the moon below the mountains, and I'm going to do the same with the sun. So there we go. And again, don't forget to ease those keyframes. So now, the daytime comes in, the moon disappears. Now we want a similar thing to happen with the sun, but the other way around. So click that, click the sun layer, open up your transform, and select your position. But we're going to go to the end of the transition for this, and highlight position, keyframe it, and then we'll go to the beginning of the transition and pull the sun all the way down. And then, there we go, easy select keyframe. So now what we've got is this. Whoosh, whoosh, your first bit of animation, well done. So I'm just going to close all the layers there and reopen my sky so I know when this happens. Actually, in order to know when the transitions are going to happen, I'm going to make some markers again. So at the beginning of the first keyframe, and at the beginning of the last one. Actually, I said that the other way around, but you get what I mean. Excellent. So now we just want to quickly get this sun rotating. So if we get it to a point where it's up and we can see it, I'm going to highlight the layer and press R for rotation. I'm going to teach you a quick expression to get this thing rotating constantly. Now we could use keyframes. So if I keyframe the rotation and then move to the end, I could start spinning it. And as you've learnt, that would mean as we move along, the sun starts spinning. And that works just fine. And I think it works great. But I'm a lazy person. So what I like to do is hold Alt and click rotation, which brings up this expressions thing. Now, I know what you're thinking. Expressions, coding, a little bit worrying, isn't it? And a bit intimidating. But this simple expression is really effective, which is time, asterisk, which means times, and then any value you want. So I'm going to use 15. So this means the value of rotation is going to be the time in our composition times by 15. And you can see now, if we look at the sun, it's going to slowly start rotating. There we go. If you wanted to change it, you could change that to time times 30 if you wanted. And that would rotate at a different speed. Excellent. Right, so now that we've done that, I've rendered a quick RAM preview for you, which looks like this. Excellent. So that's what we've created so far. Now you notice it's a two-dimensional scene and we've got no real character to the movements in it. So let's change that, shall we? We're going to create a 3-dimensional scene using what we have here. So first I'm going to toggle my switches and modes, just so I've got access to these 3D buttons. And now I'm going to create a new camera, and this will allow us to make a 3-dimensional scene. I'm going to use the preset of 50mm and hit OK. OK. So you'll notice the camera's appeared, but nothing's happened in the scene, and that's because all of these layers here are still 2-dimensional. So let's just set all of them to 3-dimensional besides the song. So we select all of our layers here and press the little cube icon right there. Now everything is 3-dimensional. So if I grabbed my camera tool and panned around, whoa, what's going on here? Now it looks a little bit funny because they're all together in the same position. So we're going to change that right now. I'm going to get the sky and I'm going to open its position parameter with P. I'm going to pull it back about 5,000. But of course it goes tiny, so we need to compensate for that by pulling up the scale. There we go. If you don't know how to open the scale with a shortcut, you just press S. Now the stars are a funny one because we want to pull these back as well. However, we've got this matte, the following. So if you want to keep them the same, all you need to do is parent the star matte to the stars layer by highlighting the star matte, grabbing this little twirly pick whip and snagging it onto stars. So now wherever you move the stars, the star matte will move with it. Open up the position on the stars, pull it back about 4,500. So we're 500 away from the stars, not the stars from the sky, but still far in the background. Excellent. Same thing with the moon. We're going to pull that back to about 3,000. And then, whoops, of course, we've got the positions value here. So I tell you what we're going to do instead is we're going to move the sun and the moon at the same distance together. So if we just get to a position where we can see both of them kind of, there we go. I'm going to create what you call a null object. So new null object. A null object is an empty layer which is really only used for control. And you'll see what I mean here. So I'm going to call this sun and moon. I'm going to make it 3-dimensional. And I'm going to parent both of these both the moon and the sun to the sun and moon null. Now, like I said before, the sun and moon is for control, and parenting means that they follow the same values. So now if I open up the position on the sun and moon and pull that back, you notice the sun and moon go with it. So we said about 3,000. I'm going to say 3,500 instead. And now if I up the scale, I can return these back to where they were originally. Excellent. So just so you can see what's going on here, if I orbit around now, we've actually got a 3-dimensional scene. So final thing, I'm going to take the midground mountains and set them to about 1,500. And then I have to scale them up. Now if we take our orbit tool and move around, again we've got this 3D environment, but if we take our tracking tool, we can actually see the difference between the sun's position and the mountain's position now. I'm going to take the track Z tool and actually move inwards and move the sun and moon down a little bit more into the shot, and I can track right across, and we've got this mountainscape growing now. So this looks really cool, I think. Now if I scale down the sun and moon to get them further in the shot, there we go. So I'm going to take my camera and I'm going to open all of the transform, and I'm going to keyframe the point of interest and the position. I'm going to move to the end of the composition and I'm going to drag everything across a little bit like that. So now as we move, we've actually got a 3D scene. Now the mountains really don't sell it at this point. Firstly, we haven't done the lighting on the mountains, so let's do that quickly. Let's drag on some exposure onto our mountains, so mid-ground mountains. Keyframe it at the end of the transition and pull it down about -3. And hit U to open the keyframes and then eases them both. And they grow darker with the night and lighter with the day. Awesome. So now I've got the 3D scene. As we said, the mountains really aren't selling it right now. So we're going to create some foreground mountains and background mountains. So let's go back into our project. I'm going to right click New Composition. I'm going to call these foreground mountains. I'm going to do the same that we did before. So a new solid, mountains, and these ones are going to be the foreground ones. So they're going to be in the foreground right at the camera. So I don't want huge mountains really, and I don't want many of them. Just a few, like so. Just like that. Throw on my ramp and change their color up to however I want. So let's just do something like this. And again, let's get some snow on top of these with an adjustment layer, with a mask. Hope you guys are following this. And some exposure. So this is exactly what we did in the previous part of the tutorial creating the mountains. And then we got to feather it, pressing F and pulling this down. And the last thing is throw on a bevel alpha onto the mountain layer and adjust accordingly. So let's pull that down, scale it up a bit. There we go. So back in our main composition, I'm going to throw on our foreground mountains, make them a 3D layer, and then go to the daytime and adjust their position. So I'm going to put them about 500 back, up their scale a bit. And now, as we move along, we've actually got a little bit of depth with these mountains. Of course, they haven't got the exposure from the last ones, so I'm just going to copy those keyframes and paste them onto our foreground mountains. And there we go. Last but not least, I'm going to create some background mountains. So, new composition, background mountains, and these ones don't need to be as detailed because they're in the background. So, new solid, okie dokies, and let's make them a bit higher up this time. Make them smaller, but more of them. So, again, keeping lots of points. Get some wider ones here. And let's pull that down. I'm going to throw on a ramp again. Swap them colours. Pull that down. Throw on my bevel alpha. Pull it over, set it to about 4. And then let's chuck that snow on the top of the mountain again. Actually, you know what? For the background ones, I'm going to make them a bit darker and get rid of some of the bevel. Now back in our main composition, I'm going to throw the background mountains into the background, make them a 3D layer, and I'm going to push them back about 2750. And then let's up their scale and pull them down, well down. So now as we move, again, copy over the exposure of them. Now as we move, we've actually got the mountains right in the background, and we've created this lovely mountain range. Excellent. So, final thing I'm going to do to this is add a fade in and a fade out. Now there are many ways to do this, but I like to do it with a solid, which is coloured black. I like to call it fade in, or well, fades. And it's as simple as whenever the black is shown, it's a black screen. Whenever it's invisible, it's no black screen, of course. So let's open up our opacity and keyframe it 100 and turn it to 0 further along. And then the same thing over here. At the end of the composition, in about 9 seconds, set a keyframe using the diamond here, move to the end and set this to 100. Let's RAM preview this, shall we? So now that I've loaded the RAM preview, this is what we've got. Now we could do more to this, such as adding a sort of camera shaking. We could fade in the music, we could fade out the music, and we could color correct the entire thing. However, for a basic After Effects project, our first project, this is a very, very good outcome. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed what you saw in this tutorial and used it in any project of your own, leave it in the comment section below. We'll have a look. If you have any suggestions for the tutorials or general comments, leave them in the comment section below as well. Thank you so much for watching this very long but in-depth tutorial, and I hope to see you in the next video.